大家好，歡迎參加 ADHD Awareness Week 2022嘅講座環節。我係今日嘅主持 Jonathan。我哋今日好高興請到新加坡一個 ADHD 組織 Unlocking ADHD 嘅 Jimmy 作為嘉賓。Jimmy 除咗係 Unlocking ADHD 嘅總監，亦都係一所出名嘅婚姻介紹所 Lunch Actually 嘅共同創辦人。而 Jimmy 自己同埋佢個女都係有 ADHD 嘅。我哋今日嘅講座題目係 ADHD 父親如何與子女建立良好關係。同嘉賓開始傾偈之前，我想問各位觀眾一條問題：你認為 ADHD 會否影響父母同仔女關係？事不宜遲，我哋而家同 Jimmy 傾下偈。Hello Jimmy, let's say hi to the audience in Hong Kong.
Hello, hi everyone in Hong Kong. I'm Jamie. I'm for Unlocking ADHD in Singapore.
Okay, so first of all, let me ask you the first question. If you don't mind me asking, how did your daughter and you discover that both have ADHD?
Okay, so what happened was 3.5 years ago, my daughter started having problems in school. And then she started confiding in my wife and telling my wife, oh, no, I'm having some difficulties. And I actually overheard the talk and conversation, but I didn't put too much thought to it. I thought maybe it's just growing up, there's some challenges and everything. So imagine my surprise when I was called to the school by the school counselor. And then I went to the meeting, and then the school counselor started to review the depth of troubles and challenges that my daughter was having. And it was very scary to me. She was actually writing a lot of very scary things on her notepad. She was saying a lot of things. She was having difficulties in a lot of things. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, what happened to that my little girl? What happened to my daughter here? What was going on? And of course, I woke up. I woke up and started to be very fearful of what's going on. And I started to engage private professionals to talk to my daughter and find out what was going on and was everything okay. And very quickly, one of the professionals told me, your daughter has ADHD. And that was in just one meeting. So I was saying, how do you know? And then he told me all the symptoms, all the clues. And then we immediately, of course, got her diagnosed. And in the several conversations that I had with the professional and my daughter and all that, it started to hit me. Look, isn't that some of the things I actually faced in school when I was growing up as well? And it started to, my own research also showed me that there was a big genetic link with ADHD as well. And I began to also have the epiphany that I also too had ADHD, but was undiagnosed all these decades. And that was essentially how I also found out, and I found out for my daughter that we both have ADHD.
Yeah, but I can imagine that when you and your daughter learn about the ADHD, it should be very shocking to your family. Some people gradually accept their ADHD. Others may take longer time. They may be shocked, grieve, angry at their parents or grandparents because ADHD is highly inheritable. So how did you come to live peacefully with your ADHD?
Interestingly, when I found out eventually and got diagnosed that I have ADHD, I didn't really feel anger or resentment. For me, it was more of an epiphany. Aha, okay. So, and I started to recollect all the clues that I actually had there when I was growing up, and it was actually to me more of a relief, and there was more of acceptance than any begrudgingness. In fact, to some extent, it gave me peace and some like, oh, that is why, that type of feeling rather than resentment. Saying that, I look back when I was growing up with ADHD. So growing up with ADHD was a pain. Yeah, it was indeed a very, very difficult experience. And what my daughter was going through, I went through, and in a period of time where there was a lot less understanding and recognition for ADHD. So there were a lot of difficulties. So that also brought about, ways you have to learn how to cope with it. So to me, it was more of a journey that I had to go through. And ADHD is good and bad. It has pros and cons. And one of the things that ADHD had was actually hyper-focus. which was actually a gift to me. So as a result, that also made me who I am. So as a result, I think I was more accepting to it than any resentment towards finding out.
Yeah, so I understand that it must be a long journey for you to, first of all, accept that you're ADHD and then try to, learn about how ADHD impacts your life, and then eventually embrace ADHD as a part of your identity. But
Yes.
but as a father with ADHD, what are some of the common challenges you find in parenting your children?
Over time, you yourself recognize, even without the awareness of ADHD, some of the issues you have, like some of the issues of being impatient, taking too much risk, being a bit disorganized, being distracted easily, uh, being very forgetful. And in times, you actually create strategies to deal with it, which is what I did for the past few decades, to mitigate it. You can't eliminate the issues, but you can mitigate it. So when when I found out I had it, as a father, what I did was I tried to empathize and tried to pass down what I went through and what I learned and how I dealt with it with my daughter as well. So for example, some of it will still creep up when you're parenting, right? So I don't have the best working memory. Very, very forgetful. So sometimes when you have your daughter, with my daughter or with my son or with my in family time, I would actually forget to do things, or something that's important to them, I'll actually forget. So there are some of the challenges. These things come up and then make it a bit frustrating for yourself and for your family. But then because you recognize it and you learn how to cope with it, you can mitigate some of the downside. But at the same time, you can also just be open with your children and just explain, oh, sorry, daddy had the ADHD moment. And at the same time, joke about it. And sometimes they whine a bit, but just joke about it and ask for a bit for understanding. So some of the traits are some of the challenges indeed, but at the same time, you need to mitigate it. So like I say, impatience and impulsiveness. So that sometimes leads to a quickness to anger, to quickness to scold, quickness to form quick judgments, and all these are things that are not good for parenting, especially for a child with ADHD. So you need to adjust. You need to, through your awareness, try to make sure it doesn't show up as much as it can, as tempting as it is, because it's a trait you have. Try to make sure it doesn't come up as often as it should when you are parenting.
I believe that that's important to know. And being a parent is like walking on a very unusual pathway, because let's say because as a parent with ADHD, the symptoms obviously affect your life, and one also needs to try different strategy to see what works and what doesn't work.
That's correct.
But as you were saying, it's important to be transparent over your ADHD. Communication matters. So how do you explain your ADHD to your children?
One of our family culture is transparency. For us, we tell our children, we tell them as it is, and as clearly as much as we know. So it's not difficult for us to talk to our children about my ADHD and their ADHD. So we just simply share it as it is, what we know. Sometimes we do a bit of research, we get excited, hey, it's this too, and we talk about it as if it's normal conversation. I don't think it's, in my view, is not shameful or a disgraceful thing to have. And honestly, I also share with them my true belief. As much as there's challenges and problems with it, it comes with strengths. It comes with some advantages that you have as well. And it's important you embrace the good and bad, and be aware of it, so that you can be the best version of yourself through that awareness. So we just say it as it is, we share it, there's no shame, there's no nothing to hide. And that's always been the culture we have with our children as well.
For some of the families, they see ADHD very differently. So they believe ADHD is a form of disability. So they got the attitude called "don't ask, don't tell." So as long as you don't say anything about ADHD, then that's fine, and life goes on. Whereas for other families, they are supportive, they're tolerant, they embrace ADHD as form of identity. But however, in reality, things can be very challenging. Some ADHDers have told me that their primary source of tension is the criticism from others, and the criticism can cause strain in the father-child relationship. Relatives can be very judgmental. They say that, well, you have ADHD because of poor parenting. The children may also have difficult lives at schools. Teachers, classmates may not be very considerate, and the interaction with their peers can lead to school bullying. So, how do your daughter and you navigate all of the criticism or the stress caused by ADHD?
Even before we first discovered, and when we did discover ADHD, my daughter was always not the easiest child. So many times I would, in my parenting journey with her, I actually honestly, good and bad, I experimented a lot. I went with the traditional ways, with the traditional expectations. I went with some research we did, and I went with different type of tactics. So one of the tactics, of course, we did experiment was, in fact, taking the usual, taking disciplinary actions when she does something wrong, being very blunt with the criticism. I also experimented with giving rewards, handing out punishment, but holding back judgment. To the point, I also experimented with, let's try to be more understanding and connect on their level. So I actually experimented with a lot of things. And generally, I agree with you that the things that don't work is the criticism. So it doesn't work in a very strong way, and it tends to backfire. And I actually, since then, with all the experimentation, I've moved away from it, because knowing that it doesn't work. Also, being judgmental doesn't work as well. In fact, my daughter has a very long memory. So the points where I was seeing what works, she still remembers the parts that I was a bit critical and a bit judgmental up to the days many years later. So that is damage that we don't want to do too much. It's my fault in experimenting. I was just trying to figure out what worked and what didn't work. What has worked, and for me was, in a sense, really talking to her in a very calm, non-judgmental way, and also really connecting with her on her level. So when she says something that I don't agree with, or I can't understand why this even of interest, in the past I will be a bit critical or a bit judgmental, but now I hold back. But I just will talk about it, and as I will expand on the topic with what little I know on the topic sometimes. And this patience, this non-judgmental, this non-critical way of dealing with it has worked a lot better, and I'm a lot closer with my daughter as a result. The same with other family members, right? If they deal with this, if they're going to be critical, if they're going to have a lot of criticism, if they're going to be very judgmental, and I know that it's not going to help the situation at all. So either we avoid that with them, or you have to talk to them to be less judgmental and say, I know this won't help the situation. So either you reduce this element of it, or I'm going to remove her more from this element and give her less exposure with it, which means she'll see you less. But we are all navigating this together, and this just doesn't work. So that is how I dealt with it with some of the relatives that could be a bit critical, or could be a very, very comparing. Oh, look, the brother's this, the sister's this, what's going on? So we know it doesn't work, and hence we have to embark on that method to deal with it. So maybe for other people's bullying in school and all that, I do talk to her with it, and I do level with her, and I think it comes with a different way to deal with it. And generally, she has taken the advice that, when someone bullies, she does stand up for herself, but she don't overdo it. And she does it in a way that also doesn't come with too much damage to herself as well. Yeah.
So it helps to understand communication really matters, and it's also important to explain what causes ADHD and what works and doesn't work for people with ADHD. Sometimes you need to explain it to the relatives, and likewise, your daughter also needs to learn how to protect herself in case of conflict.
Yes.
But in daily life, educators play a key role. Some educators may be more understanding than the others when it comes to ADHD. Some educators are happy to make adjustments, whereas other educators believe that as long as you try hard, then you can overcome everything. So maybe in your case, so how do you engage with your daughter's teachers or building up the partnership to support your daughter?
I think with my journey in higher education, so there's been a lot of ups and downs. So we were fortunate that the first school, the teacher was very proactive, very helpful, recognized the ADHD is a real thing. So we started off well. But saying that, we did experience in the journey teachers that were skeptical, that were impatient, and downright mean to my daughter because they can't understand why my daughter is behaving the way she is. And coming from a background where I had a terrible relationship with many teachers, and how those teachers also actually didn't really do what they were supposed to do as teachers. So I can empathize with my daughter on her frustrations when the teachers are not understanding and and refuse to even recognize it. So what I did in the past was I did try to talk to some of those teachers that did not recognize it. That in my experience didn't work. The teachers, in fact, resented some. I mean, the one I did talk to, they resent that you're talking to them, and some of them feel like you're being, by talking to them, you're intimidating them and forcing them to recognize it. You could tell your daughter to be patient with this teacher, just all that. It didn't work for me. Okay, so generally, I don't think everyone can do this, but generally, I actually removed my daughter from the school. That the teachers were very ununderstanding about it, and I placed her in an environment that the teachers, they don't. Some of the teachers don't totally buy into it, but they were not unfriendly towards the condition. So and then we would also tell my daughter that she has a role to play to how the teachers react as well. So if you go full out your ADHD traits with the teachers, it's actually quite understandable they're not going to like you much. So she had a role to play, and putting herself in her shoes of the teacher also helped my daughter to balance her reactions to the teachers, and also improve in the long run, improve the relationship with the teachers going forward as well. So she had a role to play, but the teachers had the role to play as well. But in the end, for me, that's how I dealt with it. And I am totally empathetic to the challenges of it as well, because of what I went through when I was young.
Yeah, I mean, you managed to raise a good point. So, and in fact, this is lots of the parents have mentioned to me. Sometimes they wish teacher had more understanding of ADHD. Some of the teachers are more supportive than the others. Only, and at the same time, the parents also need to work with the children, saying, helping them to understand that yes, you are ADHD. Yes, we have support for you, but but yes, you have to fight until the end. So it means you need to understand your ADHD and yet try your best at the same time. But let's move to about relationship building.
Sure.
And good parenting is about relationship building. And how do you work with your daughter to help her to utilize her talents?
For me, I grew up, I told you, in that difficult youth situation. So I took a bit of what I experienced when I was growing up and how it shaped me to be involved in the parenting style I have with my daughter. So for example, when I was growing up, because of the challenges I had, there were, however, good things like hyper focus. So when we get interested in something, we lock in, and we go very, very deep, and very we seek a lot of mastery in the area that we're very interested in. So that happened to me in the area of, ironically, what many of the people feel is a waste of time, was board games. So board games was something I became naturally very interested in, and I spent a lot of time and allowance in. And my parents didn't like it. The teachers and I would do it with some friends. I still pursued it. But to me, it led to many good things. So some of the board games were about historical periods. So because I was so interested in it, I started to read more about those periods. I started to, as a result, get interest in history. And I started to get interest in the themes of the board game, like science fiction. So that started branching out into a lot of things that actually led to a lot of good. So reading about history taught me a lot about life. It gave me about a lot of role models. It gave me a lot of things that really shaped me up to today. So I take the same approach when I am parenting my daughter. In a sense, I let her explore her interests, her passions, and it doesn't have to be school related. So it doesn't even have to be something that I can understand, because I understand if the right exploration of those topics can branch out into many good things, like it did for me. So like my daughter expressed interest in this, I'll let her explore. Then I see if the thing has roots, it develops deep roots. Let's say something is a fad, it's a phase, then it disappears, then we move on. But if something has roots and it starts to, it starts to be part of her life, she starts to have interest in it, she starts to develop more and more hyper focus on it. I as a parent allow her to explore it. I send her to courses to increase her mastery in it. I allow her to branch more into it, to explore it more. Because what I observe, even for those areas, it starts to branch out into many positives. And in ways that sometimes we won't understand, it will branch out into areas that will shape her character. And it's up to us to let her exploit and guide her to exploit in a way that would be a good development for her. So that to me is important because it is something that I went through as well. So some of it is sometimes like games or that we won't understand, but we need to let them explore.
I'm happy to hear because it's also about finding what you enjoy, and then after you learn what you enjoy, then you get hyper focused, and then you may get lots of possibilities in developing your strengths and talents. But I remember you saying that when it comes to finding your talents, it's not necessarily related to grades. But for most people, Singaporean education system is like Hong Kong's. And it's very academically driven, and grades do matter. And how well a child performs is entirely based on a school report cards in such intense competitive environment. So how do you communicate with your daughter that it's important to find what you enjoy, and grades may be just a part of your life?
I mean, being ADHD also, I grew up with some of the challenges she's growing up. So there's a great ability to empathize there. So I grew up not doing any homework. So the amount of homework I did in secondary school, I could count with maybe a hand. Okay, so that's how bad it was. And as a result, the teachers were very pissed off with it. So she has the same problem with homework. So basically the executive skills to even mark down what homework you have to do and all that is a challenge for us. This is not good. This is not going to be good for your grades. It's not going to be. You're not going to excel. This will be a top 10 or the top 10 percentage in grades and all that if you do that. But at the same time, education is necessary. As education, you need to do well enough. And my view for her is you need to do well enough for it to be for you to be to know, to be educated, and for you to get somewhere and to at least try to get a degree. To me, it doesn't have to be the best, the top, but it has to be good enough and educated enough. So that's something I openly share with her, because being an entrepreneur, we are very result oriented. So there are many talented people that do not have the highest education, that do not have the best grades, but are great at getting results. They are great at solving problems. They are great at having to be able to see a lot of the facets of things and be able to identify in a big picture sense what's the important thing to do. And these skills comes sometimes beyond the school system. And that's where I encourage her to pursue her interest, to develop skills and talents that go towards these super talents that she could have in the future. And that would be just as important in succeeding in life as getting good grades. Okay, so it's not saying that it's not important, but to me, it's important enough for her to need to consider it and to be good enough in it. But it's important I let her explore and develop her talents to become a superpower. That is my view in it.
I'm happy that you said this, because you also made me remember why it matters to master future skills. Your capability to empathize with others, your ability to embrace continuous learning. But let me move to your son. So I know that you have a son, and quite often non-ADHD siblings feel really glad when parents spend most of the time and energy on supporting ADHD children. So how do your wife and you ensure that both of your children receive the support they need to live well?
Yeah, it is very true because my daughter's challenges, we do spend more time dealing with it, and that does could seem unfair for my son, who gets less attention. That said, sometimes we feel the way to deal with it is the quality of less time there. To be able to spend a bit less time with him, but at the same time do it in a very meaningful way that he still enjoys that time that you spend with him. My son, actually, from what he's not diagnosed, but he has a mild case of ADHD. So for him, is not totally unempathetic because he also has a little bit of it, but has other things and he's a lot more disciplined. So with him, we don't have the same challenges as we have our daughter. Saying that, when we do spend time with him, like for example, I have this thing called Date Day with him. So every month I would do half a day, which I'll spend with him, doing the things that he likes, and engaging in the activities that he has the most fun with. So this is something I have to also, ADHD we sometimes forget, so we have to create systems to remind yourself of things. So I will make sure that I will just do it with him. And that quality of time we have, it will be something that will anchor his relationship with me as well, so that we to have this quality of time together. Saying that, my wife also has that day with him. So we try to make sure that as much as we're spending a lot of time on Kara, my daughter, we do spend time and remind Coram, which is my son, that he's also important. We love him. And we are very grateful and thankful that he's willing to be tolerant and let us spend more time with my daughter. But at the same time, because you are important, I still will definitely make effort with you. I definitely will love you and spend time with you as well because I want to. So that is a message we communicate often with him.
I believe that you raise a good point. The other child needs to feel support, love, despite all the challenges. And likewise, your wife also helps a lot. But on the whole, it's about getting the whole community to support parents and children. So in your world, what support do you consider important to help ADHDers to become good parents?
I mean, this one, I'm not sure if everyone can have it, but in a sense, but my wife and I are business people. So sometimes we travel together, sometimes we travel, and sometimes we are very busy in certain periods. Of course, during this time, we do communicate with the kids, but still there needs to be someone to look after them. So it's important you get your support system up. So during the times when you're busy or you have to handle something or you're traveling, you let them know. At the same time, for me, I have a very good helper. The helper is someone I actually can trust, and I can leave them alone with the kids, leave her alone with the kids, and I know nothing bad will happen. So that's a good thing that we have. But saying that, if we were to rely on family, that's important to identify which family could actually be part of the support system. So for me, it's my brother and sister-in-law. So during times and challenges, we actually ask them to come and help with our kids, and they're willing to do that as well. So the extended help also is an important example to the kids also, to emphasize to them the importance of family and times of need. Family help each other. So as much as it's something that's important and convenient for you, it is an example and message you want to give your children as well.
You managed to talk about why a good family system or support system really matters. So say your brother-in-law and the helper, they all help your children to live well when your wife and you travel. Let me dive into the helper because for lots of the families in Hong Kong, they also have helpers with the kids with ADHD, while some don't. Whereas in other cases, the parents may not allow the helper to discipline the kids with ADHD when the kids misbehaves. So, how do you ensure that the helper will get all the support he or she needs? To when he or she meets your with your children.
For me, it's still in the culture of transparency in our family. So I consider a helper as family also. So the journey we go through with Kara's ADHD, I do share with her. I can't partially share everything, but I do share with her the journey and what Kara is going through in a very transparent and there's nothing to hide and nothing to be shameful sense. And I do tell her directly how she can help as well in dealing with Kara's ADHD. So she is aware she's part of the team. She's part of my solution for Kara. And also because she's also understanding of what Kara is going through. So she's able to understand. So I also, she's not even aware she's of what's going on. Then of course she could be upset or challenged when Kara does something out of the normal, right? So that is that transparency and involvement of the helper is something we are fortunate that we are comfortable enough to do. And of course, not everyone has the different comfort levels. It's really up to everyone's comfort level, how much they want to engage the helper into the process. But for us, we get them very involved. What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
The second part is about, how you ensure that the helper will get all the information he or she needs in order to get along with your children.
So as mentioned, so we are transparent with her. We actually share what we know, and we really even share her role in it. So that is for us how we have dealt with it, and as I said, different level of comfort. So that's how we do it. If you are not comfortable, it's still necessary, I feel, to be transparent. Or else the helper is not going to be. Sometimes ADHD people do something that will trigger people, right? So if with awareness, that happens less. So if the helper is aware, then that is a more smooth relationship for both parties as well, and less misunderstanding. So I think transparency is the minimum, and talking to and saying what my daughter has is necessary for it to work.
Transparency, clear communication help a lot. In supporting ADHDers and their fellow family members to support their children. But let's move to another part. Good parenting requires growth and self-care. How do you support yourself to be a good parent?
I am fortunate. My wife and I, we strongly believe in learning and self-improvement. It's just a family value that we have, and we try to give to our children as well. So having this value is important because when ADHD entered our life, we could be resentful, or this is just so difficult, so troublesome. Now I have to deal with it. So how do you deal with it? So we just went on our old ways of dealing with it, and we learned about it. We studied it, we learned about it, we found out different strategies to cope with it. We talked to people, and we just simply tried to gain a lot of knowledge and mastery over the subject. So up to today, we're still learning, to be honest. So it's never-ending ways of trying to create a better situation for this during the situation. So whenever we see some useful habit or some useful activity we can do, or some useful ritual we can include in the family to help with the condition, we experiment with it and we say, why don't we all try this now? If it works, everyone resonates with it, that's good. Then the situation is better. If after a while you get sense that everyone don't like this new ritual you're doing to deal with it, then you just move away from it and say, guys, didn't work. Let's move on to and learn and do something else. So this constant experimenting and trying to make the situation better is something that the children has to understand too. And if you embark to give them that value that we are going to experiment, we're going to test things, and sometimes it works and sometimes it fails. It's just a value you want them to have, and at the same time value they have to accept if you are part of this family. So that is why I think we are able to do this without resentment that, we're changing again. There they go again, they're adding new things. Okay, so saying that with all this, you need to give space also. So sometimes when I need my me time or my wife needs her me time, then we need to work as a team and give the me time space to your spouse or your partner to make sure that they can recharge, and then you look after the kids during that time, and then you play a bigger role during the time that they are recharging. So that is something that these two things have sort of worked very well for us. So my wife or I'll come back recharged and back to trying to make the situation better. for our children. Yeah.
I'm happy you say this because because parents are also caregivers, so continuous learning, me time really matters. But let's move to the last question of this interview. For someone with ADHD, what do you see as the strength in parenting?
ADHD people generally we are hypersensitive, so we wish we could be less, but we always will be, I think. So as well, it could be very useful for parenting because you are actually very sensitive to how your kids are feeling and how even how your spouse is feeling. So in a sense, you are intuitively tuned many times to when they're upset and something's wrong and they're not saying it, but at the same time they're saying everything is okay, I'm okay. But because you're hypersensitive, you're empathetic enough to know that there's something wrong, and that's where you gently engage them to coax out the issue and essentially make it a bonding time with them. So that is a skill, and that is something that parents ADHD can be very good at, sensing the undercurrents, and then going in a very gentle way to try to resolve and make them feel happier. Okay. People with ADHD are also, we are generally, because we are a bit spontaneous, impulsive, and we can be a bit creative. So that is actually a good thing sometimes, right? Rather than always engage with the routines, sometimes at the right moments, you just impulsively just do something different. And that can be something that can add some fun, some zest, and some excitement to the situation. And also very useful for breaking the pattern and breaking the mold and helping your children to form suddenly happy and fun memories with you. So that is also a strength, actually, to actually embrace. We parents with ADHD are also generally, we are risk takers. It's just something that we comes with the impulsiveness. We want to take risk in a sense, but at the same time, when it comes to parenting, that is something we can really use our experience to share with our children. So to encourage them, by example, to take risk when they need to, even sometimes when the odds are not so good, to take some risk, to take a chance, but at the same time, balance it with your own wisdom and your own experience that you got with many years of taking or decades of taking risk. So this is something that, as a parent, you want to pass down to your children as well with ADHD, to take risk meaningfully and to balance it so that you don't fall too flat in your face.
I'm so happy to hear this. In fact, you inspire me. You help me to understand the joy, the challenges of being a parent with ADHD. So it takes the whole family to support you. It also helps to understand how ADHD impacts your life. And of course, it's important to help your children in order to live out their potential. So should we say goodbye to the audience in Hong Kong?
Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm of Hong Kong. Definitely happy to share, and glad to be able to share this, and hope it's been useful.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
我哋好多謝 Jimmy 同各位分享咁多寶貴嘅知識，希望能夠增加大家了解 ADHD 朋友，都可以成為好嘅父母。各位觀眾，我哋嘅節目就嚟到呢度啦。我哋仲有更加多嘅精彩環節，記得留意住我哋嘅時間表同準時出席啦。拜拜。